Aaron, do you have anything coming in, or maybe any previous questions that apply to naming our losses, naming our experiences?
Absolutely. Actually, so we've started collecting questions and stories on our my.tckid social networking page from our followers over there. And we have a couple of comments about, having a name or having language for their experiences. We have one comment here from somebody named TT Hill. She says, I'm an ATCK, and I struggled with having an identity for a long time and still do. Since joining this TCK community, I found a language to articulate and relate to a lot of the struggles that I've had. I'm about to embark on a journey with my children that will expose them to being TCKs. And she wanted to ask, how do I help them work through or be confident in an identity? My parents were both diplomats, so I have 4 different cultures I identify with: Nigerian, Senegalese, American, and British. My husband is British, and my kids are mixed race. We are moving to Beijing, and I'm not feeling very confident about helping them with a sense of identity. I still find it hard to answer the question, where are you from? How do I help my children with this?
Well, I think, do I get to jump in?
Go for it.
The first thing about this story is we haven't even talked about one of the new things is increasing cultural complexity of so many who are growing up in today's world. I grew up between Nigeria and Chicago, okay, Illinois. So I had 2 worlds I navigated. Many of you have this multiplicity of worlds, and then your parents or your children, the multiple cross-cultural marriages or partnerships, and it's just really becoming more complex, which is why what you're doing is so important. But I think maybe one of the challenges, are there new ways to think about identity? Because I think this is also why sometimes it's hard for academicians to believe there's perhaps a legitimate topic here, because it does do what you say, Myra. It moves past the typical boxes. I think for an awful lot of kids and for a lot of families, that's why it's so important that you build first a terrific family identity if you can, where you have traditions that are your families that are mobile. And then instead of working against the diversity and the difference, embracing that. And I think one of the other things I see a lot of families in this situation do is they develop and grow with their kids. Something my parents, I suppose, did intuitively. They gave me gifts from every place we've been. So I kind of had my world in a box, and if I went to college, I put up my stuff, and I thought every house I've gone for all these years, I put up that group of stuff. And that kind of marks this now as both my background and my present, and I think using the experiences when people are in different countries, not just ignoring that you're there, but really developing that uses the gifts of the experience, I think. But the big thing is, I think also allowing our children and ourselves to say, I can be more than one. Now, some people say that's not so. We do need a sense of belonging. But I have a bunch of places I feel very much that I belong to. I belong to my nuclear family. I belong, of course, with my children and so forth. But when I'm where my grandmother used to live, everything in me just says, this is it. When I get off a plane in Africa and I see the stars and the skies and all that, I think this is, I belong here. Something's here. But I also believe that for me, I have come to understand I belong in this international expat lifestyle community. When I travel places and I speak at different places and I'm in that community, I don't know the people, but I know that life. And it feels like, yes, I understand what this life is like and I belong. So I think we can find lots of belongings. For me, now other people, you may all have your own story, but we are both a place that we have citizenship, but we can also belong in, I think, larger ways than maybe would be traditionally understood. That's how I feel. You can all say what you feel. See, I'm old now, so I can say what I want.
You earned that right.
Thanks. But I do feel at home. Maybe because I've come to feel at home in myself. I can feel at home. I don't have to prove anymore who I am. And I know that everybody won't understand my story, but I don't understand everybody else's story. I can relate to them as a human, but I don't know I don't know what it's like to be my neighbor and go to Lucent Technology and be an engineer. I don't know what that. I don't know what it looks like. So why do I think he should know what my life? But we can be good friends. We can be good neighbors. But I don't know other people's worlds either. But I know the world I have, and I'm at home in it.
And I know that some of us, we have a different experience with language because, for example, you can think of a concept in a certain language that may not have a translation in English. And so for those who grew up with different languages, in a sense, we had to find that thread, that wave level that isn't limited by language. And I think a lot of us try to communicate and understand one another even when there might not be a language there. And so what I noticed for myself, I always try to scratch beyond the surface of what I see. And I've been called acutely analytical by people in grad school. But it's really from that place of, I know it's misunderstood a lot also, but it's just scratching beneath what I see. Because there is something beyond language that humans connect to. And I think third culture kids are very sensitive to that wavelength. Michael, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just having come from China and having some background with Africa, and just thinking about this family and the fact that it will be a big transition. That's the first thing is not to cover that over and say, well, it'll all be okay. It will be okay, but to take it seriously and be really intentional, I think is critical for everyone. What Ruth said about the family culture, even what a family does together in the preparation process for going overseas, and this is so specific to the question, but also general, adds to that bonding of the family. That we're going to look out for each other. We're going to take care of each person's need. One of the aspects of that transition process is the chaos, and the chaos leads us to our natural selfish tendencies to take care of myself. And so even things like that, to expect that to come and to kind of prepare ahead. If there's a kind of boot camp experience that a family can go to, sort of like a pre-field orientation, I know that there are quite a few available, not as many as there probably should be, but if not, there are a lot of books, a lot of resources, a lot of great authors. In the TCK book, which I just had to show, I had my original one with me today.
There you go.
That section on the raft and preparing, so critical to make sure that relationships where you are taken care of before you move to the next place. And sometimes it's not possible to make everything, to fix everything, but to walk into that place of reconciliation, to offer that, and to be able to start clean is so important. And then the rest of the raft has some really helpful aspects of things to do together as a family to prepare.
Such helpful information. Erin, is there any other comments coming in, maybe specifically about naming our losses, naming our experience?
We just have one more comment. This one is from Uta Limaker Nripo, also from our my.tckid website. She says that I notice that many parents who raise TCKs are not even aware that there is a name for them and that there are studies and articles about it. I don't like to categorize people, and I'm not aiming to do it, but I think that if people would be more aware of the ups and downs of a TCK life, many children, young people, and adults would struggle less. And so she wanted to know how we can raise awareness about TCKs among people who are starting life abroad with their children.
That's what your job is. I'm being a little facetious, but that's really absolutely right on, because it isn't about not doing this experience, it's about how to do it well. We're not going to stop it. We're living in the middle of a grand social experiment that has never been done before, and nobody's going to stop globalization, nobody's going to stop the high mobility, nobody's going to stop the cross-cultural stuff. So that's why I think, as Mike was saying, there's this key place, and as you were referring, Myra, to Ted Ward's comment. We've had this little petri dish to look at what does this experience do to people? How does it form it? How is it different from a traditional monocultural background? And then how are the things that we've learned, how can we apply them? One of them is making parents aware that this isn't the same way that they grew up. My mother grew up in Chicago, from day one. And after I started doing this, she said, until you started doing this stuff, I never thought that Chicago wasn't your home. Now, I'm thinking, Mother, where did I grow up? My whole life was in Africa. But I said, why were you surprised? She said, because Chicago's my home. So I think a lot of the parents don't really stop to think about cultural identity, how we form it, all these things. And they get very shaken when their kids don't seem to feel exactly like they felt or something. But anyway, I think social media is huge. I think that the corporations and the organizations that send people overseas have to keep realizing, and many, many are doing better. And, we started the Family and Global Transition Conference trying to improve that awareness, that if you're sending people overseas, you are responsible for helping prepare them. And certainly Dave Pollock was very, very big on that, calling for full of care, where there's a responsibility not just for the employee, but how do you prepare the whole family? Because this is different than hiring somebody to, work in a local bank or something else, because the whole family is impacted when they take a global assignment. So I think that there's a huge amount of work to be done. There's a huge amount of work to be done with educators, because even those who aren't going overseas, they're coming to, wherever local schools are. As I said, you guys have a big job. I'm going to cheer you on, but it's a big job, and it's absolutely needed, because it can be such a well. I think, we all know that when you're not stuck in the challenges, unresolved grief, because people don't understand the story, is the biggest thing I see that's where people get stuck long term. And that sense of where do I belong is part of the grief. But when people become understanding that this is also a gift, it's a paradox. There's the struggle, but there are enormous benefits. We start to use them. And yesterday I got a doctoral dissertation from Patricia Stokey, and she has just finished it, and she did her work on the global mindedness of TCKs, and how this has prepared this group of people to be leaders and participants fully in a globally changing world. So the gifts are huge, and as parents understand that, how do they then help develop it? And part of that is dealing with the challenges effectively so that kids don't get stuck. And building the raft is probably one of the biggest things, that you just don't leave without saying goodbye. Because if you say goodbye, then you can say hello. If you don't say goodbye, you can't really say hello well. That was Dave's big line.
I love that. If you can't say goodbye, you can't really say hello. That makes a lot of sense. Michael, do you have anything to add?
I would. The thing that stood out to me in that, what the person sent in, was that the question about labels. I don't like to label people. I don't like to to mark them. And I think that's good and it's important. Even though there's still work to do with, there are a lot of folks who are TCKs and who don't know it. I think there's a lot of work still there to do. But I think there are also, I've run into TCKs who say, I'm tired of hearing that term. Please stop. Don't even talk to me about that. I don't want to hear that acronym. And what's important in that process is to say, that yes, this is something that it does happen to you, but you participate in it. It's going to change your perceptions and of the world and culture and sense of identity, belonging. There will be issues of grief. There will be questions about purpose, and what do I do with all of this? It's just one of the things I love to address. But that it does not supersede the person. The person remains the person. I think of this with my own kids, hearing from them. I'm an individual. I'm me, and that's absolutely true. Each person is unique. I think it's what the label or the language does for people is also allows us to bring tools. One thing that I like to say to TCKs is you're not crazy and you're not alone. these things are that you walk through, including sometimes depression and struggles and anger and different things that you might face. Those are pretty normal. It's okay. That's a part of, can be just part of the process. The second thing I would say to a parent, which I've said many times to parents with the schools I work with in China, was you cannot stop your child from becoming a third culture kid. You've already made that decision. You brought them from Korea, from South Africa, from England, from Nigeria, U.S. to China. So now they're in between cultures. They're not going to become Chinese, and they're not going to remain exactly German or Korean or whatever. But what you can do is you can prevent them from taking hold of the advantages of being a third culture kid. You can keep them from making good friendships. You can keep them from language learning and things that you can keep them from experiences that would stretch them and help them gain, Myra, as you were saying, empathy, for the viewpoint of the other. So those things, that and I've seen that happen. And so to think about, yes, these are the challenges. Yes, these are the gifts of being a TCK, and to work on highlighting and bringing those gifts, out in the time abroad is, I think, really important.
That's such an important point. I know that because if we don't recognize a part of our identity, it does rob us of the gifts that come with that identity and that life experience. I just received word that the link was now posted on TCKid.com, and for those just tuning in on TCKid.com, thank you for your patience. We just had some technical difficulty, and we have been live on our Facebook fan page, and I'm glad that you could join us on TCKid.com now.